Hello and welcome back. So we're now going to concentrate on the pockets. We've made our bodice, so we're going to move on to the skirt, and the pockets are an optional part. I'm going to add pockets to mine, so I'm going to take you through the steps now to make the pockets. Now you'll see it's easier to explain if I show you the paper pocket pattern, in fact, because I did spend a little bit of time sort of getting my head round this from the instructions. So you'll see that you've got 3 fold lines marked on this paper, and you can cut notches at these points on your pocket pieces to help you, and then you're going to draw a line on your fabric where those dotted lines are, and that's going to help you. Now the next thing that you're going to do, and I'll show you on the paper, you'll fold all around the edges, but I just wanted to show you how the folds go. Once you've folded the edges round on your fabric, you're going to fold, looking at the right side, you're going to fold one down, then you're going to fold 2 back, and then you're going to fold the remainder to the back. So your pocket will end up with a little flap at the front, just there, and then there'll be an overlapped bit at the back which is longer. And I hope that makes sense, because I thought it might help to show on the paper first, and then I'm going to show you on the fabric. So the first thing to do is to mark these lines on. So I'm looking at the wrong side of my fabric now, and I did cut notches where those folds are. I've got 1, 2, 3 notches there, same on the other side. And I just want to draw those lines on. I'm going to use a chalk pen for this. It's quite tricky actually, because I'm on my ironing board, and getting the chalk to kind of come out when you're on an ironing board doesn't really want to, so I'll try my best. You're probably best off doing this on a hard surface, and then the chalk would show up a bit more. There we are, so you can see that line, that pink line there. And then I'm going to do the same on my next set of notches, which is here and here. And this is where you should do this on a hard surface really, so the chalk will show up a bit easier. And then I've got my 3rd notch there and there. I'm just going to draw that on as well. And this is a really good ruler, because it's a quilting ruler, but I can sort of line up, making sure that I'm at right angles, and I do like working with this ruler. It's got lots of uses. Right, that's showing up there. So it's a bit faint, but you can hopefully see I've got 1, 2, 3 chalk lines going across there. Now the next thing that you're asked to do, you can see that I've started on one of my pockets, and I'm going to work on both pockets together because I want them to end up identical. I want both of the pockets to look the same on both sides. So the next thing that you're going to do, and you can see that I've done this on this one, is to go round and just finish the edge. So I've gone round on my overlocker. If you're zigzagging, you can just zigzag stitch. If you're doing this with jersey, you don't really need to finish it because jersey doesn't fray. Because I'm working with woven, I've drawn my lines on. The next thing that I'm going to do is go round and overlock that edge. Right, so I've overlocked all the way around the edges there and given it a little press. Turn it to the wrong side, so I'm looking at the wrong side of the fabric, and I've got my 3 lines towards the top. And now I'm going to do exactly what I've done on this pocket. I'm going to turn the edges in by 1.5 centimetres all the way around. So start off with the long edges, and I'm just going to turn it in by 1.5, and you can grab your tape measure and just measure, or you can do it by eye. As long as you do the same on both pockets, it's fine. So if you do 1 centimetre, if you do 1.2, if you do 1.8, you know, as long as it's whatever you do on the first one, do the first one and then use that as a guide to make sure that both pockets are the same, as you want both your pockets to be even. So I'm probably slightly less than 1.5 here in what I'm turning. You don't really want to go too far. below 1.5, but I just want to make sure that both my pockets look the same. So just give that a press, and I'm going to press this side as well. And then I'll compare my two pockets and just check that they are both the same size. Because you're going to have one pocket on either side of your skirt, and you just really do want those to look even. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top, so that the top of the pocket is the bit nearest to these lines that you've drawn, and I'm going to fold that top edge down by 1.5. And this one, you know, I was a bit scanty on the side seams actually, but I'm going to make sure that I really have got that a good generous 1.5 over at the top, just because I'm now going to stitch that down, and if that fold is too meagre, too slim, then it just won't, it'll be really tricky to sew. So give yourself a nice good 1.5 turning there. And then you're going to turn the bottom up by 1.5 as well. So I'll do that, and then just look at, do both your pockets simultaneously. I'm doing mine slightly differently because I was fiddling about with the first one before videoing, just to check that I got my head round what I had to do. So, you know, but I would suggest that you do both of them at the same time, so that you can just kind of look at them, measure them up against each other, and check that they're the same. I'm going to repress those top and bottom folds on that first pocket because they were I was a bit stingy. So I'm happy with that one, and I'm just going to repress that first one to make sure. I want both those pockets to be exactly the same length, because I just want a nice even look on my skirt pockets. Okay, so that's looking good. So now I'm going to take these over to my sewing machine, and I'm just going to sew along that top fold there. So the top fold is the one that's nearest those lines that you've drawn on. So I'm just going to sew along there. Okay, so there's my 1.5 centimetre fold, and I'm going to just line that fold up with the 1 centimetre line on my sewing machine. Make it nice and easy, and I'm just going to stitch that down. Straight stitch, nothing fancy, I'm just stitching that fold in place. Now if you are if you're making this with a jersey, with a knit, then you can use a zigzag stitch, a stretch stitch, or whatever you would normally use for sewing your jersey fabrics. I'm just using a straight stitch for my woven fabric. And a little back stitch at the end to finish. I'm going to do that on both of my pockets, both the top edges of my pockets. Okay, so there are my two pockets, and I'm now looking at the right side of the fabric, and we've got the stitched line at the top there. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to fold these down to that third chalk line, and I can see that chalk line just along there, so I'm going to fold that down, and I'm going to give that a really good press, hold it in place, and I'll do the same on both of them. This crepe is a little bouncy, so when it comes to doing the pockets, just, you know, slightly more of a challenge. There's the line, that chalk line there on that one. Those two pockets are nice and the same. Let's do them both together, then you can make sure that they're the same. A little press there. Okay, so now I've got my second chalk line just there, and I'm going to fold back up along that second chalk line. My finger there and there. In fact, what you could do is you could pop a pin there or something just to help you with that one. There we go, and I'm going to do the same on the other pocket. Move that along a bit. So you're kind of zigzagging or concertinaing the fabric there to create that fold. And then we're going to give that a jolly good press. This is where I'm thinking, oh, if I was working with cotton lawn, this would be like really super satisfying doing these folds. There we go, so there's that. Now we're going to turn back to the wrong side. So we're looking at the back of the pocket. Make sure everything's lined up, take a bit of time, and then we're going to fold that back down on itself. And this is the inside of the pocket now. Okay, and then we'll do the same to the other one. So I'm just going to line those up so that I can make sure that both pockets are the same size. Bit of fiddling about. There we go, give that a press. So when I turn these back round, I'm just going to have a little look at them and just check that those pockets both look the same. So what we're going to do now is just attach them to the dress. Okay, so there are my two pockets, all pressed and nicely looking the same. So the next thing, if I just move those to one side for just a second, is to attach them onto your skirt. So grab your skirt panel, and you want to take the panel where you did put those markings on. So there's my skirt panel, and there's my side seam going down there, down that diagonal. And I just want to lay that out, and I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 chalk marks that I transferred. So I'm going to line up the pocket with those chalk marks. So there's the top corners of my pocket there, and the bottom corners down there. If they're slightly off, don't worry about it. But just make sure that whatever you do, again, on one side, mine are slightly off, and I think that's just from this being quite a crepey kind of fabric. So you just want to make sure that that is centralised to those chalk marks. And I didn't worry about pattern matching actually on this one. I mean, it looks like these almost could pattern match, but if you're using a more obvious print, you could make a feature of it and pattern match, or cut out a pocket with a particular part of the print on it when you're cutting out, if you wanted to do that. But there you go. So I think that looks nice and straight, and it's central to those 4 dots. So I can now just pin that in place, and what we're going to do is we're going to pin this in place, making sure it's nice and straight there, and then we're going to sew round here to secure the pocket. So that's that pocket pinned into place. I'm now going to come over to the other side of the skirt and pin my other pocket. Just realised I'd left the iron on there. I'm just going to pin my other pocket, and then I'm going to take a good look and just check that they're level and straight. I'm just kind of doing it on my ironing board here because I've got my camera set up, but once I've done all my pinning, I will just hold my skirt up and check that everything is straight. So those pockets are now pinned in place, and they're looking nice and even on both sides. So I'm just going to top stitch them onto my dress, and I'm going to just take this really nice and slowly. Let's move this a little bit so that I'm nice and close to my machine. I've got the camera angle okay, but I'm not. Got to make sure I'm comfortable sewing as well. Okay, so let's just make sure those folds are tucked in. I'm going to start at this top edge. I've increased my stitch length from my standard 2.2 up to 2.6 because I think that looks nicer, slightly longer stitch for the top. and I'm just a couple of millimeters in from the edge. So I'm just going to do it by eye. I haven't really got anything to line myself up with there. So I'm just looking here, and I'm just looking in this window and just making sure that that's going along the edge, just a couple of millimeters in. So this is a beginner project. If you're a true beginner and this is the first dress you've ever made, you know, you might want to just practice the pocket on a scrap first, just to see how you find it. Because I'd say this is slightly the more trickier part of the project, doing these pockets, because you've got to get them looking nice and even. So my advice would be, especially if you were, say, for example, making the jersey one, and the jersey sort of bouncing over the place a bit, you might think, actually, if I'm a complete beginner, I might leave the pockets off. Just because getting this top stitching nice and straight on the top, you know, on the front of the dress, you might find slightly more tricky. I'm coming towards the corner, so I'm just go right into that corner there, hand wind that final stitch, and then with the needle down, lift up and pivot round. And then I'll continue along the bottom of that pocket there. And I think these will look very pretty and effective, actually. And just I stop at intervals and smooth my fabric down, flatten everything off. I just want everything to be sitting without being sort of folded back or draping off the table or anything like that, where it will get stretched. There we go, almost into that corner now. And where am I? Oh, I can just afford one more stitch into that corner, and then swivel round again. And again, just make sure that nothing's caught up. Put that foot back down, make sure that I'm removing the pins as I go, and I go back up to the top. And if you're using jersey, you would do this with a zigzag or a lightning stitch, or a stretch stitch, or whatever you find works with your jersey. So you might want to do a couple of trials first, just to check that pocket sitting nice and flat there. So I had an exciting message that my jersey fabric is going to be delivered on Friday. That's exciting. I've got lots of gorgeous fabrics arriving at the moment, ready for spring. So I've got this polka dot crepe. This is by Lady McElroy, Tea Party Crepe. I've got it in a sage green as well, and a colour that they call chantilly, which is black and white, or ivory ground with black dots. It's very pretty. So I've got some choices of this fabric in, and then I've also got some gorgeous florals and lovely jerseys on their way, little dots and patterns. Right, I'm coming right up to the top of that corner now. There we go. Now in the book, hope you can see that they say that you can reinforce that top corner with a little triangular shape. So I'm just going to do that on both of mine. So I'm going to swivel that round. Oh, postman's just been. Hello, postman. I've just sat at the front of the house here so I can see everybody going by. And I'm going to come across the top of the pocket, and I'm just going to hand wind 1, 2, 3, 4, and I count and hand wind those stitches so that I can make sure I do exactly the same on both sides. And then I'm going to put that down, and then I'm going to stitch, basically I'm going to stitch a line ending here. And I'm just going to go back over to the other side of the pocket and do exactly the same on the other side. So that's how that looks, and that just reinforces the top of that pocket. There we go. So I'll just go back into the other side, trim off those thread tails, and I'll just go back into the other side and do the same.